He laughed at me the first time I told him I didn't believe in straight guys. "Good luck with that theory," he said, sipping his whiskey like he was immune to the world. "Because I'm Exhibit A." That was how our story began, half joke, half darried, a noisy bar in Brooklyn, where everything smelled like old leather, cheap bourbon, and too many broken promises. I wasn't supposed to notice him. He wasn't supposed to notice me. And yet, the moment his eyes met mine, it was like the whole room tilted, like some invisible rope had already started pulling us into each other's orbit. The thing about him was this: he carried himself like he was untouchable. Broad shoulders, confident smile, that casual arrogance straight men wear like armor. But then came the dinners. 4 of them. For nights where the candlelight softened his edges, where the wine loosened his laughter, where silence between us felt more dangerous than any confession. By the 4th dinner, when his hand brushed mine on the table, when his gaze lingered too long on my lips, I knew my so-called theory wasn't just a theory anymore. He was unraveling. And maybe so was I. The first night wasn't supposed to mean anything. He had asked me out of politeness or maybe curiosity. I never got the real answer. He said it was because we worked in the same building, that we always ended up waiting for the same late train, and that he figured it wouldn't kill him to grab a bite with me. But when I walked into that dim-lit Italian place, when I saw him sitting there with the collar of his shirt half unbuttoned and his eyes darting nervously toward the door, something inside me whispered that it wasn't just casual. "You're late," he said, smirking. "You ordered without me?" I shot back. He grinned. "I don't need to order to know I want steak." That was the thing about him. Blunt, teasing, impossible to read. He talked about sports, work, women, always women, like he was stacking bricks around himself, building walls so high no one could climb them. But sometimes, in the middle of a joke, his eyes softened. And when I leaned closer, I swore he didn't lean away. The second dinner was different. He suggested it this time. Said he knew a place in Manhattan that made the best damn lasagna this side of Italy. He didn't mention the candlelight, the violin player drifting between tables, or how he booked us a booth that forced us to sit closer than friends ever needed to. That night, he asked me about love. Not in a direct way, but in the way straight men do when they're testing waters they don't want to admit exist. "So," he said, twirling his fork, "what's it like? Dating guys." I almost laughed. Messy, beautiful, terrifying. Kind of like dating anyone, really. He nodded slowly, like he was cataloging my words, like they mattered more than he'd let on. By the 3rd dinner, the air between us was charged. He walked me home afterward, his shoulder brushing mine every few steps. I told myself I wouldn't read into it. But then, halfway across the bridge, he stopped, turned to me and said, "You make things complicated." "How so?" I asked. "Because you make me think about things I'm not supposed to." I didn't answer. Neither did he. But the silence stretched so thick I could almost feel it pressing against my ribs. And then came the 4th night. The restaurant was quiet, intimate, tucked away in a corner of the city like a secret. He chose it. He held the door open for me. He ordered wine before I even sat down. And through it all, he kept looking at me like he was memorizing my face, like he wanted to capture every flicker of candlelight reflected in my eyes. "Why do you keep doing this?" I asked him, my voice steadier than I felt. "Doing what?" "These dinners." "Me." For a moment, he didn't move. He just sat there, his jaw tight, his chest rising and falling like he was holding back words that burned too much to say. Then he leaned in, so close I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, and whispered, "Because I can't not." My breath caught. The world around us blurred. And for the first time, I saw him not as Exhibit A, not as the man who swore he was straight, but as someone drowning in his own contradictions, reaching for me like I was the only thing keeping him afloat. Later, when he walked me home, the night was cool, the city alive with distant sirens and laughter spilling from late-night bars. His hand brushed mine again. This time, he didn't pull away. He let it linger. Then slowly, deliberately, he wrapped his fingers around mine. He held me, and in that small, impossible moment, the world shifted. That was the beginning of everything. But beginnings are dangerous. They fool you into thinking endings don't exist. The morning after that fourth dinner, I couldn't concentrate on anything. The sunlight pouring through my apartment window felt too bright, too loud, too merciless. I lay in bed replaying every second of the night before his voice when he whispered, "Because I can't not." The way his hand trembled slightly before it slid into mine, the warmth of his palm pressed against my skin as though he was terrified of letting go. I'd held plenty of hands before, but his it was different. It was rebellion, denial, and desire, all rolled into one desperate gesture. And that terrified me more than I wanted to admit. At work, I saw him across the lobby. He was with a group of coworkers, his tie loose, his laugh booming as if nothing in the world had shifted. But then just for a split second his eyes found mine. The smile faltered, his jaw clenched, and he turned away as if burned. That single glance was enough to unravel me all over again. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a message from him. "Meet me tonight." Not at a restaurant. My place. No explanation. No smiley face. Just 8 words that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I told myself not to go. I told myself I wasn't some experiment, some dirty secret. But when the evening came, when the city lights blurred past me in the cab, my heart betrayed me. I went. His apartment was neat, almost sterile, like a hotel room someone had tried too hard to personalize. Framed photos of sports games, a few expensive-looking bottles of whiskey on the counter, a couch that looked barely used. It screamed control, like every detail was chosen to keep people from guessing too much about the man who lived here. He opened the door barefoot, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, hair damp from a shower. He looked younger like that, softer, human. "You came," he said quietly. "You asked," I replied. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air was thick, charged. Then he stepped aside, letting me in. We sat on the couch, side by side but not touching. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, slid one toward me and said, "I don't do this." "Do what?" "Guys, this, whatever the hell this is." His voice was strained, like each word was dragged out of him against his will. "Then why am I here?" I asked. His gaze locked onto mine, raw and unguarded. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The glass slipped in my hand, whiskey spilling onto my fingers. My pulse thundered in my ears. He set his drink down, leaned closer, and whispered like it was a confession meant only for the walls to hear. "You make me feel like I don't have to pretend." The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't smooth or cinematic. It was messy, desperate, his lips colliding with mine like a dam finally breaking. His hands trembled against my jaw. Mine clutched his shirt like I was afraid he'd vanish if I let go. When we pulled apart, breathless, he stared at me like he couldn't believe what he'd just done. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, dragging a hand through his hair. "What the hell is happening to me?" I smiled sadly. "You're falling, whether you want to admit it or not." He shook his head, stood up, paced the room like a caged animal. "I'm not gay. I'm not, this isn't me." "Then what is it?" I asked softly. He stopped, turned, eyes blazing with something between fury and fear. "It's you. It's only you." That night, nothing more happened. We sat in silence, the tension so thick it nearly choked us. He wouldn't touch me again, not even to brush his hand against mine. When I left, he didn't walk me home. But the kiss god, that kiss haunted me. The next week was a war. Between us. Within him. Sometimes, he'd avoid me completely, acting like we were strangers. Other times, he'd send me messages late at night, words he'd delete seconds later, but not before I read them. I can't stop thinking about that night. "You scare me. I want to see you again." Each message felt like a lifeline and a knife at the same time. Finally, on a Friday, he showed up at my apartment. No warning. Just a frantic knock at my door and him standing there, rain-soaked and shaking. "Tell me to leave," he said, voice raw. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away." I didn't tell him to leave. Instead, I pulled him inside. That night, something shifted. He wasn't just the guarded man who swore he was straight. He was vulnerable, open in a way that made my chest ache. He touched me like he was memorizing, like every second might be our last. His breath hitched against my skin, his voice breaking when he whispered my name. It wasn't just sex. It was surrender. And when we lay tangled in the sheets afterward, his arm draped over my waist, his face buried in the crook of my neck, I realized I was in deeper than I'd ever planned. I was in love with him, but love with him was a battlefield. The morning after, he was cold again, distant. He dressed without looking at me, muttered something about work, and left without a kiss, without even a backward glance. I sat there, the sheets still warm from his body, wondering if I'd imagined the tenderness of the night before. Days passed with no word from him. My chest ached every time my phone buzzed, only to reveal it wasn't him. And then just when I was ready to give up, appeared again, leaning against the wall of my building like he belonged there. "We can't keep doing this," he said. "Then stop showing up," I snapped. He looked at me, eyes dark and stormy. "You think I can?" It became a cycle. He'd pull away, then come back. He'd kiss me like I was oxygen, then vanish like I was poison. I told myself I'd walk away, that I deserved better, that I couldn't keep tearing myself apart for a man who didn't even know who he was. But every time he came back, every time his hands found mine in the dark, every time he whispered words he couldn't say in daylight, I fell all over again. The breaking point came one night at a crowded bar. He'd invited me, said it would be casual, just drinks with friends. I thought maybe finally I was ready to stop hiding. But when one of his coworkers asked who I was, he laughed and said, "Just a buddy, just a buddy." The words cut sharper than any knife. I left without saying goodbye. He didn't follow. 2 weeks passed before I saw him again. By then, I'd convinced myself I was done, that I'd rather drown in the silence than keep clawing at scraps of his affection. But when he showed up at my door again, this time with eyes red from crying, his voice hoarse, whispering, "Please, don't shut me out," I knew the war wasn't over. Not yet. The knock on my door that night wasn't soft or hesitant. It was loud, frantic, almost desperate. By the time I opened it, he was standing there like a man who had been running from himself all his life and had finally run out of places to hide. His eyes were wild, bloodshot from sleeplessness or maybe from holding back tears he refused to admit he had shed. His shirt was wrinkled, his jaw dark with stubble, and he looked nothing like the polished, untouchable man I had met months ago. "Let me in," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. I stepped aside, and he stormed past me, pacing my apartment like a storm trapped inside four walls. "I can't do this anymore," he said, raking his hands through his hair. "Do what?" My voice was sharper than I intended. The weeks of silence, the humiliation of being called just a buddy, the endless cycle of being pulled close only to be pushed away, and it all rose up inside me like a tide I could no longer hold back. "Us," he said. "This, whatever this is, it's killing me." "Then stop." The word burst out of me before I could stop it. "If it's killing you so much, then stop. Walk away. Pretend none of it ever happened." "You're good at pretending, aren't you?" He froze, his chest rising and falling like he had been punched. "You think I want to pretend? That's all you've ever done." My voice shook. "You kiss me in the dark and ignore me in the daylight. You call me just a buddy to your friends, like I'm nothing more than some casual acquaintance. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To be hidden, to be denied." His face crumpled. For once, he didn't have a retort, didn't have a wall to hide behind. He looked like a man stripped bare. "I'm scared," he admitted finally. His voice was small, broken. "I'm scared of what this means. Scared of what people will say. Scared of losing everything I thought I was." Something in me softened. Anger and love warred inside my chest. But love, stupid, reckless love, always had a way of winning. "You don't lose yourself by loving someone," I said quietly. "You find yourself." He sank onto the couch, buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once, twice, like he was fighting something he couldn't control. I sat beside him, leaving just enough space that he could choose run or stay. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was his ragged breathing. Then slowly he reached for me. His hand slid into mine, hesitant at first, then firmer, like he was clinging to a lifeline. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I don't know how to be the man you deserve." I turned his face toward mine, forcing him to meet my eyes. "Then don't be perfect. Just be honest." His lips trembled. And then, with a sigh that sounded like surrender, he kissed me. But if I thought that kiss would fix everything, I was wrong. Because outside my apartment door, the world still existed. His friends, his family, his career, the carefully constructed life he had built on the foundation of being straight, successful, untouchable. And we were a secret. The days that followed were an uneasy truce. He would come to me at night, his touch urgent, almost frantic, as if he was afraid each time might be our last. In the mornings, he would vanish before dawn, leaving nothing behind but the faint scent of his cologne on my sheets. I told myself it was enough, that stolen hours were better than none. But the more I loved him, the harder it became to live half a life, to love him in the shadows while he smiled for the world as though I didn't exist. The breaking point came at his company's annual gala. He had begged me not to come, said it would be complicated, messy, but I was tired of being erased, tired of pretending I was invisible. Against my better judgment, I went. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and laughter. Men in suits, women in gowns, champagne flutes clinking like chimes. And there he was tall, devastating in a black tuxedo, smiling that easy smile I knew so well. Beside him stood a woman, her hand casually hooked around his arm. His coworker? His date? Couldn't tell. My stomach dropped. I tried to leave before he saw me, but his eyes found mine across the room. For a second, the mask slipped. His smile faltered. His grip on the woman's hand tightened, then loosened, and then he looked away. I left the gala, heart pounding, tears stinging my eyes. An hour later, he showed up at my apartment, furious. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded, slamming the door behind him. "What was I thinking?" I shot back. "What were you thinking? Parading around with some woman on your arm while I stood there like an idiot in the corner?" "She's just a friend," he shouted. "It's business. Appearances matter." "Appearances," I echoed bitterly. "That's all this is to you, isn't it? Keeping up appearances. God forbid anyone sees the truth." His face hardened. "You don't understand." "You're right," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't understand. Because I'm not ashamed of who I am. I don't lie to the people I care about. I don't hide the person I stopped myself. But the word hung in the air anyway. Love. He heard it. I saw it in the way his eyes widened, in the way his breath caught. "You love me?" he whispered. The silence between us was deafening. "Yes," I said finally. "I love you. But maybe that's the problem." For a moment I thought he would say it back. His lips parted. His hands twitched at his sides like he wanted to reach for me. But then he turned away. "I can't," he said. And just like that, he walked out. The days that followed were the darkest I'd known. I went through the motions of work, of life, but inside I was hollow. Every corner of the city reminded me of him, the bar where we first met, the restaurant where he asked about love, the bridge where he told me I made him think about things he wasn't supposed to. I tried to hate him, tried to erase him. But love isn't something you can cut out like a tumor. It lingers, it festers, it becomes part of your bones. And then 2 weeks later I opened my door to find him standing there again. This time he wasn't furious. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't pretending. He was broken. "I told my family," he said, voice shaking, "about you, about us." My breath caught. "And they didn't take it well," he admitted. "But I don't care. I can't lose you." For the first time, I saw him not as a man divided, but as someone who had chosen. And he chose me. That night, when he kissed me, it wasn't desperate or frantic. It was steady, certain, promise. The war was far from over. The world would still whisper, still judge. But for the first time, I believed we could face it together. Because sometimes love isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and choosing it anyway. The first thing I noticed about him after that night, the night he confessed to his family, was how much lighter he seemed. Not in the sense of carefree joy, because there were still shadows in his eyes, still the weight of conversations that had ended in slammed doors and silence. But lighter in the way someone looks after setting down a burden they've carried too long. For the first time, he didn't hide. He didn't check over his shoulder before reaching for my hand. He didn't keep a step of distance between us when we walked through the city. He still hesitated, yes, but his hesitation was no longer fear of me. It was the unfamiliarity of living honestly, and I loved him all the more for it. The first Sunday we spent together after that was unlike any other. He invited me to his apartment in the afternoon, not at midnight like before. When I arrived, the blinds were open, sunlight spilling across his living room. He'd cooked badly, burning half the omelet, but he grinned sheepishly when I laughed and ate it anyway. "I'm trying," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "I know," I said. The truth was, his effort meant more to me than perfection ever could. We spent that afternoon on the couch, legs tangled, watching some dumb action movie neither of us paid attention to. Every time he laughed, he'd lean into me, and every time I smiled, I caught him looking like he couldn't believe I was real. At one point, he whispered, "I don't want to go back to the way things were." "You won't," I promised. But the world doesn't soften just because two people fall in love. His friends noticed the changes first: the way he stopped joining in their crude jokes, the way he slipped out early from guys' nights, the way his phone lit up with my name more than anyone else's. Some drifted away, others stayed but whispered behind his back. At work, the rumors started. Quiet at first, then louder. He faced them head-on, his jaw tight, his answers simple. "Yes, it's true. He's important to me." I knew it cost him. I saw the strain in his shoulders, the way he sometimes came home exhausted, collapsed onto the couch like the world had drained him. But he never once made me feel like I was the cause of his suffering. He would pull me close, bury his face against my neck, and whisper, "You're the only thing that makes it worth it." And I believed him. One night, as autumn settled into the city, we walked across the same bridge where months earlier he had said I made him think about things he wasn't supposed to. The air was crisp, the skyline glittering like a million tiny promises. "I used to hate this bridge," he admitted. "Every time I crossed it, it reminded me of that night, of how close I was to ruining everything I thought I knew about myself." "And now?" I asked. He stopped walking, turned to me, and took both my hands in his. "Now it's the place where everything started to change. And I don't hate that anymore." His lips curved into a small, nervous smile. "I think I want to remember it for the right reasons." I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" He dropped to one knee. My breath caught. He didn't have a ring. He didn't have a speech. Just him, raw and trembling, looking up at me with more honesty than I'd ever seen in his eyes. "I don't know how to do this the right way," he said. "I don't know how to promise forever without screwing it up. But I do know I don't want to spend another day pretending you're not the most important thing in my life. So, stay with me for as long as you'll have me." Tears blurred my vision. My chest ached with too much love to hold in. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times." He stood, and before the city, before the river, before the ghosts of who we used to be, he kissed me. This time, it wasn't a kiss born of confusion or denial. It wasn't desperate or stolen in the dark. It was steady, whole, true. The months that followed were not perfect. His family took time. Some never came around. His friends were divided, some loyal, some not. But he stopped apologizing for who he was. He stopped hiding me. And slowly the world adjusted, or maybe we just stopped caring whether it did. We built something together: late mornings tangled in bed, grocery shopping on Sundays, arguing over movies, laughing until we couldn't breathe. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of love that belonged in headlines or novels. But it was ours. And it was enough. One winter evening, months after that night on the bridge, we found ourselves back in the Italian restaurant where it all began. Same corner booth. Same candlelight flickering between us. He reached across the table, took my hand, and smiled. Do you remember the first night? When I told you I was Exhibit A of a straight guy? I laughed. And I told you I didn't believe in straight guys. He squeezed my hand. You were right. For once, there was no hesitation in his voice, no fear in his eyes, just love. And in that moment, I realized we had already written the ending to our story, not with grand gestures, not with perfect words, but with every quiet choice to hold on, even when it hurt. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't coming out to the world. Sometimes it's simply reaching for another hand in the dark and refusing to let go. And he never did. Neither did I. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.